That's basically the picture. Now the question is where we're headed. And here, I think we have to all make a real effort to be very serious about where things are headed. Because from Israel's point of view, it has a big problem on its hands. It suffered a military defeat in 2000, suffered another military defeat in 2006. It tried to reverse those defeats with the assault on Gaza, but most people were not impressed by the Israeli military's conduct. Most people were disgusted by its cowardice. And so Israel didn't really restore the Arab world's respect for its military prowess. Then Israel has a series of bungled, messed up commando operations. They had a bungled operation in Dubai in the earlier part of the year, and now they had another one on the Mavi Marmara, to which I'll return in a moment. And then Israel sees this new coalition of forces assembling in the Arab world. There's Iran, there's Syria, there's Hamas, there's Hezbollah, and then all of a sudden, out of the blue, there's Turkey. Where did Turkey come from? Turkey is Israel's main ally in the Muslim world. So what's happening here? This guy, Erdogan, this Turkish prime minister, he's got this weird idea in his head. He thinks Turkey's important. So he goes to the Davos World Economic Summit after the attack on Gaza, and he tells Shimon Peres, the Israeli president, that you Israelis, you sure know how to kill. And then Mr. Erdogan, he teams up with the Brazilian head of state at the time, Lula, and he tries to negotiate a diplomatic settlement of the nuclear issue with Iran. Well, what the hell is going on here? These Arabs, these Muslims, they're getting out of control. The natives are restless. It's time to cut these Muslims, these Arabs, down to size. It's beginning to feel like 1967 again. This Arab coalition, back then it was called Radical Arab Nationalism. Radical Arab Nationalism is this strange idea that the American resources that happen to be located under Arab Muslim land belong to the people in the Arab Muslim world. That's Radical Arab Nationalism. And it had to be, be shattered. And that's what Israel did in June 1967. It shattered Arab nationalism. They said back then, the noose is tightening around our neck. And now they're saying again, the noose is tightening around our neck. Now it's not radical Arab nationalism, now it's called radical Islamic fundamentalism, but it's the same thing. This strange idea about who the resources of the Arab world, Muslim world, belong to. And so now, the noose tightening around their neck, as they see it, the Arabs and the Muslims getting too big for their britches, getting carried away, the defiant Mr. Ahmadinejad, the defiant Mr. Nasrallah, and now the defiant Mr. Erdogan. Israel has to do something spectacular in order to restore the Arab world, the Arab Muslim world's fear of it. And this became particularly acute. This problem became particularly acute after the assault on the Mavi Marmara, because the Israelis said what happened on that boat, it was a disgraceful fiasco, a national humiliation. Our deterrence took a bad blow, not because the 9 passengers were martyred, that's just swatting flies, but because of the performance of their commandos. The Israeli naval commandos are their elite fighting force. It is the best fighting unit in the Israeli army. And what happened? It was about 30 commandos who hit the deck of the Mavi Marmara, Israel's best fighting unit. And they faced about 30 civilian passengers who only had makeshift weapons. Well, many of you saw the images of the Israeli commandos slipping and sliding as they hit the deck. And then 3 of them, the elite fighting force, 3 of them were captured by the passengers. An American former Marine who then disabled 2 of the 3 Israeli commandos. He said later, they look like frightened children in the face of an abusive father. They look like frightened children in the face of an abusive father. Well, the fact that some of you are laughing is no laughing matter for Israel. Its best fighting unit, now the object of ridicule. One Israeli general said after the attack, it's one thing for people to think we're crazy, that's okay. But it's bad when they think we're incompetent and crazy. And that's the way we look. And now Israel has to restore that image of its competence. As far as one can tell now, there have been several reports issued in the last 3 months by knowledgeable persons that Israel is going to attack Lebanon. The former U.S. ambassador to Israel, Daniel Kurtzer, he said that Israel will likely attack in the next 12 to 18 months. And as they prepare the ground for attack, it's very interesting to watch how all the Western powers synchronize to prepare to lay the groundwork for the attack. How the United Nations Security Council, which has become the main instrument for death and destruction in this world, how the UN is now preparing the groundwork. So let's just look at what happened in the past 10 days. First of all, about 10 days ago, Israel announced that it was withdrawing from the northern half of the village of Gajar on the border of Israel and Lebanon. You want to pronounce it for me correctly? Gotcha. Okay. Israel announced its withdrawing. And when I first read the news, I thought to myself, what's going on here? we all know that Israel is a house guest that never leaves. So what's going on? But in truth, I knew exactly what was going on. It was perfectly obvious, because under UN Resolution 1701, after the 2006 war in Lebanon, it said Israel had to withdraw from Gaza, and Lebanon had to disarm Hezbollah. So now Israel could say, we are in compliance with 1701, and now Lebanon has to be in compliance with 1701. I turned to the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs website, and it announces Israel is withdrawing, and now we have to disarm Hezbollah. The next day, I go to the website of the United Nations, and on the home page, the lead page, they have a little video of the UN's representative to Lebanon. I think he's British, Michael Williams. He's Italian? It's definitely a British accent. No, I think they're mistaken. And Michael Williams announces in this little video, this little insert on the home page, Israel is withdrawing from Gaza. And of course now Hezbollah has to be disarmed. And what we'll see now is we're going to start with the resolutions, just like we did with Iraq in 1990-91. It's now a very efficient machinery. They will start escalating the resolutions, then they'll start with the arms embargo, then they'll start with the sanctions, to put the pressure to turn the vice on the people of Lebanon, so some of them will start to say, well, we can't really defy the whole international community. We're never going to win against the Security Council, so maybe we should disarm the Hezbollah. And then, as all of you know, in the next few days, the Special Tribunal on Lebanon, the STL, is expected to deliver its indictments for the assassination of Rafiq Hariri, and whom they said killed Rafiq Hariri. Of course, it was Hezbollah that killed Rafiq Hariri. So while the sanctions turn the vice on Lebanon and create divisions because of the harm, the hurt of those sanctions, now with the indictment of the Hezbollah for the killing of Hariri, they're going to create the divisions between the Sunni and Shia Lebanon, because Mr. Hariri was a Sunni, Hezbollah is Shia, and they're already anticipating the sectarian violence. So as the people start killing each other, as the violence erupts, as the pressures are escalated, the target will be softened. And then they will send in, or Israel will send itself in, to destroy Lebanon again. It's why it's interesting to watch. Everybody gets to play a big part. Of course, the Germans got their little big part, because the first head of the STL, the Special Tribunal in Lebanon, was Mr. Melis from Germany, a complete and total crook. Melis wanted to indict, the marching orders back then were to indict the Syrians. So he wanted to indict Syria for what happened. Then they decided, no, let's not indict Syria, let's indict Hezbollah instead. And now Melis was just interviewed a couple of days ago, so he has to preserve his reputation because he kept saying it was Syria. He says, of course it was Syria. They were working through Hezbollah. Squaring the circle. And then